to see something different, but something different saw them first. The hills have eyes.
Mister, don't take your family back in that area. The silver has been gone for 40 years now. Besides, there's nothing back in there but animals.
We're lost. The old creep told you not to get off the road.
What began as a vacation ended as a nightmare.
Hell to pay now.
What the hell was that? Turn the lights on, please.
She thought she knew what the world was all about, but nothing prepared her for this. The hills have eyes.
Oh, you going with my baby?
Get out of the way, Dick.
A mother fighting for her child loses it in the worst possible way.
I hit him with a tire iron and I split his face wide open. That was a bad mistake. I come back for you later, Curly. Why are you doing this?
The story of an American family who lost everything except the will to survive. Murdered, raped, burned, but not beaten. The hills have eyes. The story of one family's refusal to die.
I'm gonna get those animals.
The hills have eyes. A night of terror. A day of vengeance where no one was spared. No one.
Kill the babe! Kill me!
They fought back. Anything was a weapon. The family dog to the family car.
It's working!
The Hills Have Eyes. The most shocking, terrifying film you will ever see, by Wes Craven, writer and director of The Last House on the Left. The hills have eyes. The lucky ones died first.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Story Behind the Screams, where each week we take a look at the real-life inspirations behind some of our favourite horror movies, all the way from huge blockbuster horrors to some lesser-known cult classics and the terrifying real-life stories that inspired them. This week we take a look at a Wes Craven classic with The Hills of Eyes 1977, its sequel in 1984, and the remakes in 2006 and 2007. While initially watching these movies you may think that there is no way they could be based in reality. The movie takes inspiration from some real-life events. Directed by Wes Craven, starring the likes of Dee Wallace and Michael Berryman, the movie follows a family on their way to California to take a shortcut through a military nuclear testing range when their car breaks down. Stranded in the desert, they soon come face to face with a cannibalistic family that lives in the hills. There are many reports of this story and it's never been proven to be 100% true and factual. Sonny Bean is a legendary Scottish cannibal said to have lived with his inbred family around the Galloway Hills in Scotland, where he would hunt down and murder innocent passerbys and take them back to his hideout to feast on their flesh. The legend of Sonny Bean is questionable, but has remained one of Scotland's most popular ghost stories nonetheless. It is said that he and his clan killed over 1,000 people over their lifetime, which includes bodies they dug up from graveyards. If this were true, he would be one of the most prolific serial killers of all time. Born Alexander Bean somewhere in the 15th or 16th century to a father who was a ditch digger and a hedge trimmer. He tried to take up the family trade but realised he had no desire to do an honest day's work. He also worked as a tanner for a period of time, but also decided he didn't want to work for a living. He met a woman by the name of Agnes Douglas, who had been nicknamed Black due to her dark personality, and many suspected that she was a witch. After marrying, they moved to the far side of Scotland and into a coastal cave near Galloway. The cave system was extensive and several hundred metres into the coast, and had many different passageways. Twice a day at high tide, the entrance to this cave would also be submerged and hidden, making it the perfect location to stay hidden from the outside world. With no job or money, he couldn't support Agnes and himself, so he hatched a plan to rob passerbys on the isolated roads and use the goods to trade or sell for what they needed. Soon after starting this, he became afraid of being caught, so took things one step further and decided that when he would rob someone, he would also need to murder them to ensure that he would not be caught for his crimes. From here, he became more deranged, becoming increasingly concerned with how or where he would dump the bodies. He decided to take them back to the cave where he and his wife would cut them up and eat them, meaning that he would never have to travel to town to barter or trade. This would nearly eliminate all chances of him getting caught. Over the years, they would have a total of 14 children, with 8 sons and 6 daughters, all who were raised on human flesh. The family grew and grew through incest, and over 20 years had 18 grandsons and 14 granddaughters. The clan now had close to 50 members, all who had a taste for human flesh and had been groomed as killers. The increasing family size and their appetites for human meat meant that they needed to start attacking groups of people now, instead to feed this habit. They would eat the meat, then pickle the leftovers in barrels, and anything that couldn't be salvaged would be thrown out to sea. With the missing persons list increasing to huge numbers, locals and people in the surrounding areas began to become afraid but had no idea of the true horrors that lay inside that cave. Several searches were carried out to find the bodies and possibly the perpetrators. During one of the searches, a group came across the cave but decided not to search it because they deemed it impossible for human life to survive in such a place. The locals started to take matters into their own hands and lynched several people for the crimes. However, the missing persons list continued to grow. Unfortunately, next to suffer was the local innkeepers, as they were normally the last people to see these people alive. Many thought there was a conspiracy behind it. One night they attacked a couple returning from a local fair. The woman was pulled from her horse and disemboweled before she could even put up a fight. Her husband, however, managed to put up a fight long enough for a large group of people travelling behind him to see what was happening. The Bean Clan was attacked and subsequently retreated back into the shadows. The man, along with the witnesses, were brought to the magistrate, who decided something serious was happening, and before long, King James VI was leading an army of 400 men strong to deal with the matter himself. Although initially missing the cave, the bloodhounds led the army to the cave. They entered the cave cautiously and eventually made it to the family lair. What they saw was horrifying. The walls were lined with human flesh and body parts. The stench was unbearable. The piles of bones. It is said after a brief fight, all 48 members of the family were captured alive and brought to jail in Edinburgh by the king himself. They did not receive a trial and were given severe punishment. Not only would each be killed, but in the manner in which was disturbing as their own crimes. Each of the men had their genitals cut off and thrown in a fire. They then had their arms and legs cut off and were left to bleed to death. The women being forced to watch. Afterwards they were burned to death at the stake, thus ending the clan's long reign of terror. It really is hard to say whether Sonny Bean and his family ever actually existed, with reports differing from century to century and no real concrete evidence of thousands of people going missing. I do, however, think that there were a real family who committed cannibalism and murder, as this wasn't uncommon in Scotland at the time, and Galloway was seen as a pretty lawless area. Over the years, the legend of the Bean Clan has probably been greatly exaggerated and changed. Nonetheless, this story, whether true or false, served as the foundation to one of the most notable horror films of all time, The Hills Have Eyes. Thanks as always for your support, everybody. Check me out over on Instagram at First Class Horror and let me know your favourite Hills Have Eyes moment.